Hey guys, welcome to my bedroom. This video, we're talking about fiction formulas. I know that we talked about them last video, but last video I wanted to focus on how you can shake up fiction formulas. This video is what is a fiction formula and the individual fiction formulas and their blueprints. Also maybe some examples of them. In the last video, shaking up fiction formulas, like I said, we talked about how a fiction formula can be shaken up through characters, plot, setting, those kinds of things. And a great example is actually this t-shirt I'm wearing, which is from Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Pride and Prejudice is a satire romance, or just a romance. It's probably a satire from the time period. I'm not entirely sure. I've read stuff about that, but it is a romance. So it follows certain trends and formulas of that time period, of when it was written, and of setting up what you would expect in a romance book. You know, man, woman, they have issues with each other. There's conflict about friends and family and everything else, and then they start to realize that their own pride and prejudice aren't as different as they thought. But this is Pride and Prejudice and Zombies t-shirt. So obviously something was added in. Zombies. This is a great representation on how to shake up a formula. You got your romance, but then you add in something different, and it brings in the story in a different way. Of course, obviously this would be more of a paranormal romance. It's also a retelling, and it's also comedy. If you've seen the movie. I actually really liked the movie. Anyway, haven't read the book yet. So that is shaking up fiction formulas. And there we go on that. Now, what we're going to talk about are the different genres with their formulas. Different genres have different formulas. And a genre is basically like romance, mystery. It's the term you use in marketing. And each one has a different formula. The formulas can be similar to each other. Like, you can have romance be similar to a fantasy book, but they don't necessarily have the same formula, if that makes any sense. They can have similar formulas, but they are different. So let's start with a very highly known fiction formula. This is going to be seen in a lot of fantasies, a lot of middle grade fantasies, young adult fantasies. Basically, just when you think about fiction formula, this is generally one of the top two in there, and that is the hero's journey. And I said in the previous video, that's from Joseph Campbell. I did look it up that one time, right? So he looked through mythologies and developed this formula, and you can actually use it in fiction as well as like mythologies from the past, because they all seem to follow the same thing, which is really cool. You know, it's the monomyth is the hero's journey. And because of that, it's quite possibly the oldest formula. It's in its most basic form, it's pretty much kind of like a Star Wars movie. You know, you have your chosen one, your hero, who is thrusted into this quest or decides to go on a quest. His mentor eventually dies. He finds some deep, dark history, has to go into the underworld to make himself stronger, and resolves everything in the end. You can see this in Beowulf. See this in the Odyssey. Like I said, Star Wars, Harry Potter, a whole bunch of fantasy stories have this formula. And it just depends on how you change it and use it to make it different. A lot of fantasies also have minor genres inside it to help beef out the story and to make it more real, because I mean, that's fiction. Fiction is based on reality in some form. You don't look at real life and go, oh, my life is only just a romance. Done. No, you have mysteries going on in your life. You have tragedy. You have, comedy. It's okay to add those things into your craft. And you should. You shouldn't be closing yourself into one genre. The hero's journey is a great starting point for authors. It was my starting point. I actually have something that I wrote in 6th grade, and it is a horrible book. I may do a video just reading it because it's bad. But it was my starting point, was a hero's journey. I even killed off a character in the story because you're supposed to kill off a character. It's like the turning point. It's what changes your heroes into, it's the catalyst of the plot. And there you are. The next genre I'm going to talk about is actually romance. Romance. This is, honestly, this genre is probably the most ridiculed of formulas because it is pretty basic. Boy meets girl, girl meets boy, girl meets girl, boy meets boy. It doesn't matter how your couplings happen. They just do. And there's always like an inner struggle, or a boy has another girlfriend, or there's a crazy ex, or someone's got this issue, someone's got that issue, and there you go. It is, like I said, it seems the most basic, it seems the most ridiculed. It's also probably the hardest formula to write. I'm saying it right now. For me, it is the hardest one to do. And the reason for it is because of how basic it is. If you're writing like a contemporary romance, you have to stick in certain parameters. But nobody wants to hear about someone washing the dishes. That's boring. I hate washing the dishes. I'm pretty sure my fiction characters hate washing the dishes. And that makes it a problem. It makes it hard, and you have to figure out what to do. And I actually have something to talk about on that. There is actually a book coming out. You can already buy it on Amazon. You can get it on pre-order an ebook, I believe, on Amazon as well. It's called Princess for a Day, Volume 1. There's also a second volume. I don't have it with me right now. You should probably get that one as well. It's a pretty cover. It's red. And these are sweet romances, which are, yes, there's even another thing about romances. You have sweet, steamy, and it all has to do with the content of the relationship. Like, how is that relationship sex driven, or is it not? That's what it means. And this one is sweet, so you're not going to get sexy scenes. You may get tension, but it's not like detailed. And this story, my story in this book, called Teasing Over Turnovers, kicked my ass. I'm not joking. It was so hard to write it, to make it sweet, to not do anything. And I'm afraid that it's probably the most basic short story I have ever written. Yeah. So I am not ridiculing romance authors at all. If they figured it out, they figured out the formula, they know what they're doing. I'm still trying to figure it out, and it is difficult. So, yeah. Like I said, this is actually ready for purchase, so go on ahead, read it, and tell me how basic my story is, because I'm gonna need help. And I love challenging myself, so I'm probably gonna keep doing that. But romance authors who have seemed to, in my opinion, surpass the formula would be like Nora Roberts is one. I actually really like how she has used the formula and made it her own. And there are others, but most of the romances I read are actually paranormal romances, which is a genre in itself. Because you add in vampires, witches, shifters, that kind of thing. Urban fantasy is the next one I'm going to talk about. So I talked about fantasy and hero's journey. But what is urban fantasy? Well, urban fantasy is an umbrella genre, again, with little pockets of other genres mixed in. Alright? So the urban fantasy is basically an easy way to do a lot of different genres and put them together. And great examples of urban fantasy would be like The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. There's an indie author called J.P. Sloan. He does urban fantasy. Melissa Olson. Shannon McGuire. Urban fantasy is well known in the indie field. That seems to be a very good high market for indie authors, at least from what I've seen. But I also love to read urban fantasy, so maybe that's just the algorithm is putting me in that area anyways. But what's great about the urban fantasy formula is that basically, as long as you know the baseline formula of what you want to do, so if you are doing a romance, all you have to do is just add in paranormal things on top of that and mix it up. Obviously, with the paranormal stuff, you have to weave it in good. Urban fantasy is a great example of joining genres together, and that's a great way to shake up your formulas. And the last one I want to talk about is the mystery fiction formula. And this one's a little easier for me to write. And the reason for that is because you have your crime, you have your victim. So you have your crime, your victim, your hero, and your perpetrator. Those are basically all you need for a mystery genre. And for your formula, it's basically the only ingredients. It's the little stuff in there that make it exciting. So what are you doing for your hero to solve the crime and find the perpetrator? You know, how is the victim important in this grouping of 4? And that's probably one of the easier genres to shake things up with. And then you can add in urban fantasy, because a lot of urban fantasies are actually mysteries. And you can add in regular fantasy. There's actually a book called A Murder of Crows, which has to do with 2 police officers in a fantasy world solving the murders of this group of mages, which is called the mages are called crows or something like that. I haven't read the book yet. I have it. But because it's a mystery and then it's also a fantasy, it grabbed me. So, you know, mysteries are quite possibly the easiest genre to shake up. And that's just my opinion on it. It's easier for me. It's something I really like to write. I've written a steampunk, so there's your fantasy, a steampunk mystery series. I like to say it's like Sherlock Holmes. It's like Sherlock the TV show Sherlock, steampunk setting, and my main character is just a little quirky. So he's not like Sherlock, he's like Sherlock with ADHD. That's Leviticus. And so that, like I said, mystery is easier for me. I kind of use my horror-like mysteries because you have a mystery in your horror stories. You can't just, here's a person who gets killed, done, let's make it scary. No, there's a suspense in there, and so you need those, and it's just an easier genre for me. But there's another mystery subgenre called the cozy mystery, which is a little more basic and therefore a little harder for me to write. And that is because they are generally contemporary. They have an amateur sleuth, and there you go. Hallmark mystery movies have a lot of the cozy mystery motifs, and I love them to death. I actually watch Hallmark mysteries all the time, and that's sad, but it's true. And so there you go on that formula. They're a little harder than the mysteries, in my opinion, because you have to stick in the parameters of an amateur sleuth. And I don't know about you guys, I sure don't know how to sneak into a crime scene without getting into trouble. And I'd be scared about getting into trouble, too. So there's that. So what I was going to do was read a gist of my closing statement. I wrote an outline, hey. But honestly, I think I'm just going to read my closing statement right away, because I'm actually kind of proud of it. Yay me. And so there you go. And I'll just elaborate more if I feel the need. So what I wrote down, because I clearly can't memorize my scripts, I said, you might have noticed that the last few formulas I addressed were of a similar vein with minor differences. Which is true. I mean, the mysteries, cozy mysteries, are very similar to regular mysteries because they are mysteries. And urban fantasies have a lot of mysteries too. So there you go. Those three are very similar, and there you go. But that's because you can mash them together. You can mash formulas together. You can make them something different. It's pretty much like you as a person. You have half of your mother's DNA, half of your father's DNA, and that's what makes you. And you can do the same thing with a book. You can use the half of the DNA of a mystery, half of the DNA of a romance. Bam! We have a suspense romance, which I absolutely really love to read. I should probably write some. But there you go. Those can be mashed together. It doesn't really matter. Obviously, A Murder of Crows, which I had spoke about in fantasies, they have, or did I speak about it in urban fantasy? Oh my, I can't remember now. But it's a regular high fantasy book with a mystery. You can mash those two together. You know, don't just put yourself in a little formula corner and say, I'm only going to write this. Nah. Add in other things. It's okay. Bring in more people into the club. Let's have some fun. Dance around. That kind of thing. And it shakes things up. And it just makes your story more unique. It makes it interesting. It develops the world better, the characters better, and it develops you as a writer. It's when they get too basic that it gets boring. So why not add other things to make it more believable, interesting, and just loved? It's perfectly okay to do that. And yeah, there's my thoughts on fiction formulas. I can elaborate more later. If anyone wants me to, please comment down below. If you want what I have just talked about, or at least the outlined notes, because I really don't write word for word what I'm going to say, I will post that in my blog. But that blog post will not be until tomorrow, Saturday. Tomorrow, right now at this moment of filming, is actually Friday, but it won't be until Saturday. Woo, excuse me. Because there's a different blog post going on Friday. Anyway, so yeah. There we go. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Oh, except what's next week? What are we doing next week? I actually have a friend who asked about outlines. And you know what? I think I'm going to talk about outlines. It'll be kind of fun. It'll be different. I'll be moving around. I won't be sitting on my butt on a bed. Instead, I'm going to be in my office. You're going to see my office again. And I'm going to have a chalkboard. And I'm going to get my hands all dirty. And you're going to see me freak out because I'll have dirty hands. But that doesn't matter because I'll do it for you guys. It's outlining. We're going to talk about outlining. And why not? You know, I'm not a great outliner. I don't claim to be a great outliner, but I like to do outlines, and it's kind of fun because it's like a puzzle piece. So there we go. Next week, we'll talk about outlines. All right? All right. If there's a topic you guys want to talk about later on, I am all for it. Tell me down below. So, yeah. See you guys. Bye.